The following program contains the opinions of the host, guests, and call-in participants. These do not necessarily represent the views of this show's distributors or sponsors. This program may contain obscene, profane, or otherwise objectionable language. Viewer discretion is advised. Yes, coming to your cordless, everybody. It's Sunshine Head from Minneapolis. How you doing? It's Tuesday night, July 16th, 2024. It's 11 p.m. on the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. on the West Coast, 11 a.m. in Singapore. I added that tonight. 2 p.m. in Sydney, Australia, and here where I'm sitting in Northeast Minneapolis, it's 10 p.m. Central Daylight Time. I am Jim Peters, and welcome to another edition of Jim Peters at Night, episode number 136, if you're marking your scorecards. All right. Hope you guys had a good day today. We got it going on over here. Of course, we always do. My wife teases me endlessly about that. She says, "You always got it going on." Yeah, I do. That's right. That's right. So, yeah, seriously, you want to know what we got going on today? Our guest tonight is Steve Mcintosh. He's an author, and he calls himself a developmental philosopher. He's written 5 books, and it's really interesting. He's written books on consciousness and politics and how they intersect. I'm seriously, we'll get into this, and then we'll put links on our blog. You might want to check this out. It's really fascinating, the stuff he's come up with. Him and I, we taped this afternoon, had a fantastic conversation. I enjoyed it immensely. Very, very wise man. I didn't necessarily agree with every single thing he said, but that's what my job is, to get people to talk. So, and he did, and I think you'll find it very illuminating. So what do we have going on here for the rest of the week? Tomorrow, our guest is Jennifer Oliver O'Connell. She's a regular here from Red State and asthegirlturns.com. That's her Substack feed. She's going to be talking about just the stuff in the news. Red State just had its 20th anniversary, and of the 6 or so town hall properties owned by Salem Media that are all run under the town hall banner, it might arguably be the most famous of the 6 of them. I don't, depends on how you want to quantify that. But at any rate, yeah, so she's coming on. We're going to talk to her. Thursday, we have our convention panel. Now, Thursday night, we've had debate panels in the past, and we have a month in review panel that on the last show of every month, which actually turns out to be well, no, it doesn't. What am I talking about? It's not next Thursday. It's not Thursday. But anyway, so the thing is, it's the same 3 guys. And in this case, it's 2 guys plus a girl. And we're going to go live right after Trump gets done speaking, right after his speech is done. I actually don't know. I haven't even checked. I'm going to try to check for tomorrow if they have a scheduled time for that. I don't know if they do. So I'm going to be guessing. I mean, we usually do this here at 11 p.m. Eastern. I'm guessing it's going to be about the same time, roughly, maybe a little earlier. I don't know. But anyway, as soon as Trump's done talking, literally as soon as he's done, we're going live. So we're going to talk about basically not only his speech, but the convention in general and stuff that's happened in the last week. God knows there's been enough news, hasn't there? So that's this week. And next week, first of all, I'm taking Monday off. I got to help my mother move. I got an excuse. Tuesday, I think Santa's coming on. Now I'm not sure. I announced him last night, but I think he's coming on. He has a little trepidation about the fact that maybe the news cycle isn't quite ready for Santa, but I think it is. I think enough. I think enough time's passed. That's on Wednesday. Ashton Forbes is here. He's a guy. He's promoting a theory about the disappearance of Malaysian Flight 370, which happened 10 years ago. Other than supposedly a few parts of that airplane been found, there's never been any trace of it. They've never found it in the ocean. They've never found it anywhere. It literally just disappeared off radar screens. It's a fairly what actually happened that night that it actually was flying around is a fairly complex story. And I'm sure Ashton and I will get into it because Ashton's claim, this is kind of hard to buy, but I'm telling you, once again, I'm going to let him talk, and I'm not necessarily confirming or denying his story. His claim is that the US government used this as an experiment and teleported the airplane to a different location in midair. That's his claim. And he has 2 videos that he says back this up. And he says the videos are legit. Now, I've seen both the videos, and I'm sure we'll play at least one of them during our conversation. He's right. They're completely synchronized. There's, whoever did it, it'd be anyway. I'll tell you based on what I know about video production, which is fairly extensive compared to most people. It would be hard to fake those 2 videos. It would be. I mean, nothing's impossible, but it would be difficult to fake them. And then you wonder how whether people are going to go through the cost of doing that. Here's an example about another cost about the alien autopsy film that Fox News ran, or it wasn't Fox News, it was Fox Broadcast Channel. They ran it in 1995. So a guy named Santelli, what was his? Is Greg? Was it or Gary Santelli? He says he was given the footage by the guy who shot it in 1947 in Roswell. So the footage, if you've never seen it, I can't believe it. At this point, you haven't seen at least part of it. It's about 20 minutes long. It's about an autopsy done on a being that's on a table that is apparently an extraterrestrial. As a matter of fact, it more or less matches the description of what the supposed gray aliens look like. And so, I watched this film in 1995, and even then, I've been involved in video production for 20 or 30 years. And my very first thing is that's completely fake. It's like I just thought there's no way that's real, because there was all sorts of little telling things in there. The focus of the camera, all sorts of stuff. And that was my first reaction. That was reaction of most people. I mean, if you ask most people now, this video has been debunked. However, in retrospect, I'm thinking about this, and I'm thinking, do you know how expensive it would be to fake this? Then, and Santilli, if he did fake it, he obviously did it on spec because he had no idea if he'd ever get any money from it. I mean, I think it would have cost in current money, in 2020 money, maybe not 1995. In 1995, it would have been $500,000. Now it would have been $1 million. And the other thing is, people have gone through this video extensively, and there's not a single incongruent thing about it in regards to time. Like every single little thing, like the scalpels that the doctors use, everything dates to 1947 or before then, of course. There's nothing. They made no slip ups, and that alone takes a shitload of money. So I mean that's why I'm bringing this up. I like to talk about the aliens, but I'm bringing that up as a point here. Anything can be faked. Anything. If that video of the alien autopsy is not real, somebody spent an enormous amount of money to produce it. Enormous. And it's the same thing with these videos that Ashton Forbes has. It's not that it would be impossible to fake them, but at some point you reach I don't know, what do you want to call it, the threshold of accessibility or financial accessibility or whatever, where it would be very, very expensive to do it. So anyway, the videos are very compelling, and we'll talk to him. I'm very looking forward to this. He brings this up, and that is people laugh at his theory, but nobody has a better one, and he's right. Nobody does. Nobody knows what happened to this airplane. It completely disappeared off the face of the earth, which is like doesn't freaking happen. I mean, one of the theories is that it got abducted by the whole airplane got abducted by extraterrestrials, but no, what he's proposing actually makes more sense in light of the, for lack of a better term, evidence he has. So, even though it's completely far-fetched, I mean, we're going under the assumption here that the government has learned how to teleport matter. Now, if you've been following physics, and I've reported on this on the show, So I can't remember what university did this about maybe 9 months ago. Since we've been doing this show. At the end of this month, it'll be a year. It was while we were doing the show, and I reported on it. They teleported some university lab teleported some molecules. Basically, what was it, 50 feet or something like that? And the thing is, it wasn't the distance doesn't really matter because you're using quantum physics here, and so there's something called entanglement, and it could be 50 feet or a billion miles away. The distance doesn't really matter. The real question is if and how you can do it. And they said they've done it. That was a breakthrough in science, even though you don't even read about that in the newspaper because nobody understands quantum physics, let alone read about it. It's crazy. And Mcintosh and I were talking about that. I mean, the thing is, he's talking about science. That before science there was religion, and I said, well, now some science is so wacky that people are just going off of faith. We talk, and quantum physics is one of those things. So, anyway, we're going to talk to Ashton Forbes next Wednesday. On Thursday, Jonathan Tobin is here, and he's the executive editor of the Jewish News Service. That's a U.S. service, and we're going to talk about the Israeli and Hamas war. Is what we're going to talk about. So, you got Queers for Palestine, Okay, so that's what we got going. Now, I got to tell you too what we got going. Well, here's what we don't got going. We're down on Blog Talk Radio. We're not on again tonight. We couldn't connect last night. We couldn't connect tonight either. So I don't know what's going on over there. This has been a problem for them. I'm going to tell you the last couple months. I mean, this is the 6th or 7th time in the last 2 months we have not been able to connect over there. So I don't know. And I write them and they keep writing me back. We're really sorry, blah, blah, blah. It's their problem. I know that. It's not our problem. So I don't know what's going on, but we can't connect there either. And for that reason, I took the call-in ticker off the bottom of the screen because we have the interview is pre-taped and we're not gonna have a lot of time other than that. So what's in the news today? I'll tell you what's in the news today. So today's Tuesday. Yesterday was Monday, and yesterday was the first Monday after some kid took a crack shot at Trump and ended up basically making him an icon. So what happened on Monday was that Morning Joe usually goes on at 6 a.m. Eastern, and they canceled it on Monday. NBC, they said they were going to cancel it. What they told Mika and Joe and the staff of Morning Joe that they were going to cancel it because they wanted to run one network-wide news feed among all the NBC news properties. Then MSNBC is one of them. That's where Morning Joe is. And then they got NBC News Now, and they got the regular NBC affiliates. They got all this stuff. They got it's like freaking everywhere. I know they're probably a YouTube channel for all I know. And so they told Mika and Joe. They said, "You guys stay home. We're not going to put the show on." So what happened on Monday, and now that was true for the entire weekend. They ran a network-wide feed, a one network feed on all their properties all weekend long, except on Monday when they were supposed to continue doing the same thing. They just put a bunch of anchors on the air, and they in place of Morning Joe, and Mika and Joe got really mad. And I kind of don't blame them, but on the other hand, supposedly the inside scuttle on this is that in Morning Joe is so unhinged, they didn't want to get in trouble either socially or legally by putting crap on the air that was going to bash Trump, because that's all they ever do. I mean, it is a bash Trump channel, and especially that show, and especially because Mika and Joe apparently feel personally miffed by Trump by Trump because they put him on a show a million times during the 2016 campaign for entertainment purposes. Then he actually won, and they weren't expecting that, and they were not pleased with that. So they've been bashing him ever since. Now, so to Tuesday, this morning, Joe and Mika come on the air, and they probably had sex last night. Who knows? It's like, am I being coarse by crass by speculating there? No, I'm not, because here's the deal. This holds true. Anytime you get co-anchors that are boffing each other, the show goes to hell. And I've said this, I've used numerous examples. I'm not even going to get into it right now. I'm not going to. But this is basically a general rule of broadcasting. You want to keep your show interesting, don't screw your co-anchor. That it's the death of it. And it's the death of Morning Joe, too. Morning Joe has sucked ever since these people got married or actually hooked up. So anyway, they come on. And they said, and Joe gives some impassioned speech about the fact, if they do this, if they ever do this again, we're not going to be working there anymore. And I'm thinking, well, you stupid fool. I'm thinking, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? And then I'm thinking, and then it occurred to me, no, I'm the stupid fool. I'm the idiot. They can go somewhere. CNN would, I bet CNN would pay boatloads of money to put these people on the air. They're getting about 1 million people a day, morning, which may not sound like is not a lot in terms of cable television news ratings, but it's way more. CNN is even doing half that, and they haven't for years. CNN's ratings are on the toilet. And also, if you put the two of them on the air, it's the same show. They're going to get the same audience. They're literally just going to change the channel. So I was thinking, no, Jim, you're an idiot. I bet, and it wouldn't surprise me. I have no idea how much money these people have left on their contracts or how much time. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if CNN does that when their contracts are up. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But that's the only place they can go. But they have a place. If they quit, someone else is gonna. There is some place else they can go. My bad. I was thinking, well, Jesus, yeah. So and they're probably getting paid. This is my guess. Based on what I know about how these things work, probably $10 million each a year. That's my guess. They're probably, as a family, bringing home 20 million bucks a year, and you're thinking that's unbelievable. Yeah, it's unbelievable. If you do the math on commercial time, and especially you got this show on, it's now 4 hours a day. It's been 4 hours a day for about a year and a half, 2 years now, not three. It's 4 hours a day, 250 days a year. And you think about, 15 minutes of commercials an hour, and commercial time goes for about $20 a thousand viewers. So if you have 1 million viewers, it's about $20,000 a spot. And then you multiply that by 30, not 15, because you get two 30-second commercials in a minute. And then multiply that by 4, and then you multiply that by 250, and you're talking about a shitload of money, folks. And that's why people are in broadcasting. That's the reason. The money adds up. I just read just today that Skip Bayless on ESPN, excuse me, no, he's on FS1. He's on Fox Sports 1. Sorry. That he's getting paid $8 million a year. And now that show, the show Undisputed that he's on in the morning, that gets about 400,000 viewers, which like I said, for cable TV isn't a lot, but it's not nothing. And so even he, you could probably justify his $8 million a year salary with that. You probably could. So anyway, I mean, yeah, you're in the wrong business. That's right. And me, nothing. I'm getting paid nothing because I'm stupid. So that's what happened in the broadcasting world. Now I'm going to address what's happening in the world of security. So last night, what we're talking about here, as I went down the rundown, it's like, all right, so I got a friend of mine who says that the whole Trump thing was hoaxed. I don't know if he's changed his mind on this or not, but obviously it wasn't, because one person died. And not to mention the fact now they just released the names of the two people. They're still in the hospital in critical condition. So you got people who are dead and seriously hurt because this whack job was on this roof shooting at people. So I completely, once you're talking about people dying, all bets are off. No, it wasn't hoax. But then the question is, was it staged? In other words, was it an inside job? Now, I went through this last night, and I explained how you do it if it was an inside job, but it probably isn't. And my primary reasoning for that is that all right, let's just assume the CIA wanted to kill Trump. All right, now why do I go to them? Because they're in all conspiracy theories, they seem to be the boogeymen, and they're certainly the boogeymen. They're the odds-on favorite of the people who killed JFK. They are, and not only that, you want to talk about RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Sr., not Jr., who was assassinated in 1968. That's a really, really weird story. That's even weirder than the JFK assassination, because even the acknowledged evidence points to the fact that Saran didn't kill him, even though he's standing with a gun 3 feet away from him and shooting. And so it's just really, really weird. I know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and a friend of mine called me on this, but it turns out he checked. He found out that I was right. has publicly said that he does not think Sirhan Sirhan killed his father, and he doesn't think Lee Harvey Oswald alone, anyway, killed his uncle. He said this. So I just use the CIA as an example here because they're kind of the most likely culprit if you're a conspiracy theorist. So what do they got to do? Well, they got it first. You got to recruit a shooter. Now the thing is, this kid, he's 20 years old. It was supposedly, there was at first it was saying, well, he was on the shooting team at his high school. Now it turns out he did not make the shooting team because one of the kids on the shooting team said he was a comically bad shot. He was terrible, terrible. Now, and I said, well, I don't think if you're going to recruit somebody for the shooting that you'd want to get somebody who was not that good, right? Right. That's where my logic was. Now I'm thinking, okay, well, first I have to tell you what happened today. There's a guy who was formerly with the Canadian Secret Service, and I can't remember if that's the mounted police or not. I can't remember, or whatever they call it in Canada. The same, it's their version of our Secret Service, and his job was to protect the Prime Minister. And he said, after looking at everything that happened here, he said it's just completely obvious to him it's an inside job. And I thought, oh Jesus, okay, so what am I missing? Well, apparently. This is where you're going on the rabbit hole. So, okay, we learned that this kid's a really bad shot. Well, maybe that's planted information. Maybe it's not true. He came literally a centimeter away from killing the former president. He did. And not to mention the fact that, people talking about how bad a job the Secret Service that were there on site did. The fact is, he got off about 6 shots in quick succession. He's using a semi-automatic rifle, and he was killed within seconds. Within seconds. I mean, that kid didn't live to see anything. So I mean, he's dead. And then and it occurred to me. I said, well, why? Well, maybe he wasn't that bad a shot. Maybe that was just planted information. Then there's another planted information. And this I saw coming a million miles away. All of a sudden, there's stories this morning in the news and the mainstream media about the fact that Iran was also planning to kill. And everyone mentions the fact there's no tie between this 20-year-old kid and the Iranians. But Iranians, the Secret Service are on the lookout because Iranians also had a plot going to kill President Trump. And apparently that's because he killed their general, what's the guy's name? Sulami. And it was supposed to be in retribution for that. But then I'm thinking, well, and I've been in this game a long time. I smell this shit a mile away. I'm thinking, why would you bring this up now? It's like it's a diversionary tactic. I mean, even if you're saying they're not related, it's like, look over here. It's like, look over here. Don't look at what the left hand's doing. The left hand's stuffing a rabbit in the hat. It's like I'm thinking that why is this coming out now? It's like, what are you trying to divert my attention? And then on top of that, so now people who were on site, now the videos are coming out about what actually happened in Butler, Pennsylvania that afternoon. And it turns out that, like, everybody missed this kid except the public. There's all sorts of videos from the public of people saying, look, there's a guy on the roof with a gun. It's like, what? Really? So a bunch of people in the crowd saw this, and well, supposedly now there's the local police department, the Butler Police Department, saying that somebody did go up on the roof, an officer, and confront him, and this kid pointed his rifle at the guy and told him to go away. And apparently, because the guy feared for his life, he did. And the kid started shooting at the president immediately after that. Immediately. And you don't blame somebody. If somebody's pointing a rifle at you and say, get lost or I'm going to kill you, most people will get lost, So there's no reaction time. That's what the Butler Police Department is saying, that somebody did actually confront the kid, but they feared for their life. So the only thing, the reason I'm bringing all this up, though, is because, so there's 2 things that happen here. So you got this Canadian guy who says, no, this is obviously an inside job. Even like I came up with the one reason it wouldn't be, and I gave you a bunch of other reasons last night why it would be. But I thought that the fact that the kid was they would not recruit somebody who's that bad a shot or that inexperienced. But on the other hand, if you know that the shooter's gonna get killed. You know that. So maybe you just go after some patsy. And, I've said the way they do this is they approach these individuals and they say, "Look, for your country, we would like you to do this. I mean, we're asking you." Yeah, and sometimes there's an offer of money, sometimes there isn't, sometimes there doesn't have to be, but I'm convinced that's how they do this stuff. When I mean this stuff, I'm talking about all sorts of stuff that happens. That's how they got Christine Blasey Ford, is my opinion. I have no proof of this. My speculation. That's how they got her to testify against Brett Kavanaugh, and a whole bunch of other stuff that's happened that happens in the news regarding the government on a regular basis. They approach people, individuals, and they say, "Look, for the good of your country, we need you to do this." So I suppose if you're a 20-year-old loser and you don't got a lot going on, the reports that's come out about this kid, I'm not going to name his name because I don't want to give him. I think a lot of these guys do this for the publicity, so I don't want to give him any publicity, even though he's dead. I don't care. Said he was kind of a loner in high school, but he was a really good student, and he was described as a computer savant. He was apparently a really, really wicked computer programmer. And he did go to college, and people in college said, no, he was actually a pretty cool dude, you know? Now, supposedly, the police finally busted into his phone, and they found nothing that would indicate what he's doing here. And that doesn't surprise me because, first of all, if he's that computer savvy, it's not even that he would know how to wipe his phone. He would know not to put anything on in the first place. And I'm assuming they won't find anything on any of his desktop computers either. I assume that. He just wouldn't do it. He wouldn't go. He would know. He wouldn't go there. The second thing is that maybe this happened quite quickly. Maybe it was last week that somebody went to him and said, "Look, we'd like you to do this for your country and get on this roof and shoot at President Trump." And he just decided to do it. And it was all happened very, very relatively quickly, you know. But he's dead. And the thing is that if somebody put him up to it, those people would know he'd be killed. So maybe that's another reason you don't want to, I mean, I hate to say it, people make judgments about people. Some low life lackey, he's not going to be missed. I mean, that's terrible. That's a terrible thing for me to say, but people do think that way, you know. I know nothing about his family. He was not married, apparently. I don't know if he had a girlfriend, I don't know, whatever, but it's like, people think that. So it's terrible. So, but that's where this is at right now. So the reason I bring all that up now, I'm talking in circles, which I do if you've ever watched this show. Uh, that is, it was either an inside job or colossally, hilariously huge incompetence. I mean, the amount of incompetence involved here is astronomical. That's why it's getting almost hard to believe that would be incompetence. It's like these people could not be that bad. But then Cheadle, the woman who runs the Secret Service, she gets on TV and she says, "Oh, the bus stops with me, but I'm not quitting." And she's talking about the fact they didn't put Secret Service people on their roof because it was slanted. And it's like, and then you just know she's just some sort of DEI hire. I mean, the Biden administration is going to go down in history for their incompetence. I mean, it's like everything they touch turns to shit. So maybe it is. Maybe it's just that they're freaking incompetent. Maybe, but it's starting to look less likely. I mean, it would take such a huge amount of incompetence to not catch this that it makes you wonder. And so here, me, Mr. Conspiracy Theory, last night I get on the horn here and I'm saying, well, it probably I go through how it would be an inside job, but it probably isn't. And now I don't know. I'm still, if I had to bet, I'm still 60-40 in the fact it isn't, but the 40% is creeping up. I mean, last night it was at 20%. Now it's 40%. So I don't know. I just don't know what to tell you. And then, like I said, on top of that, this Iran thing is complete diversion. Why would you bring that up? Oh, it's like because I don't know if you noticed, it's really, really convenient to blame enemy states. Russia gets blamed all the time. Now Iran, China. China's a little bit. China will get worse. They'll start to blame China for shit. It's like, oh, just shut up. It's like, no, it's bullshit. Okay. All right, so everyone kind of thought that the assassination on Saturday put a temporary kibosh on people calling for Biden to step down, and that might have been true, but it looks like that's gonna ramp back up now very quickly, and these camps are gonna get more and more ensconced. There's more and more people who think they should just forget about it, let Joe run, and there's more and more people in the Democratic circles who think they have to get rid of Joe. And the thing is, it's like both of those things are wrong because the thing is Trump's gonna win. I mean, I do not like Joe Biden as a person, and I think he's an idiot. There's that too. I mean, it's not I would, I don't care if I like my president personally, I don't, which is one of the reasons. I mean, I don't know if I like Trump either, but Trump was highly effective. Joe Biden has been the opposite of effective. He's been not only ineffective, he's been, like I said, the incompetence from his administration has been absolutely startling. They can't do anything right. Even stuff they want to do, they can't get right. They can't get anything right. So, actually do the polls seem to indicate, and Joe's his argument is that he still polls best against Trump, and it's actually, from what I can tell, that's true. Right now, it means he's losing, but I don't know if you can find anybody better. Not to mention the fact that, and I probably shouldn't go through this because you can hear this on any goddamn left wing cable channel about the fact that they're pretty much resigned to having Kamala Harris take his place if he drops out because I didn't know this until recently, but now I've learned, as maybe you have too, there's about $90 million sitting in a war chest that legally only she can get because she's on the ticket. So, I mean, they would be flushing 90 million bucks. So the way this is going down right now is they basically have 2 weeks to decide this because the Biden camp is very wisely, they have moved up uh, the the there's going to be a virtual convention to anoint their nominee because of something they screwed up in the state of Ohio. And if they don't do it, then whoever's the Democratic nominee is left off the ballot on the state of Ohio. And you'd like to think, oh my God, all this money, all this talent, supposed talent, all these people, and somebody fucked that up. Well, yeah, somebody fucked that up. That's right. That's exactly what happened. So, so they have to decide this now in 2 weeks. If I had to put money on it, I'm guessing that Biden stays, that he will be the nominee. That's my guess. But, still, anything could happen at this point, anything. God, I can't see. I need new glasses or something like that. Biden also announced today, I find this very disturbing, that he wants to make some changes and restrictions to the Supreme Court via Congress. This is not the way the three chamber government of the United States is supposed to work. The the three branches and the judiciary is a branch are supposed to be independent of each other, and he wants restrictions put on because I don't know if you've noticed this, the Supreme Court has done some things that the liberals don't like, and therefore they're really upset, and things have to be changed. Now, I think the court just does what the court does, and it's relatively wise. But although I have to say, the one thing that did concern me in this recent um, ruling about presidential power, and that is they ruled that, and it's very important to get this correct because they leave off half of it. When I say they, the liberals, uh, the court ruled that the president is responsible for things he does in office, or no, can't be held liable for things he does in office in an official capacity, but he can be held liable for stuff he does in an unofficial capacity. Now that seems reasonable, and I think a lot of people would argue, and Trump argued this too, that if you had it any other way, the president couldn't do anything. But it's not just that the people lost their minds over this. The three liberal members of the court did too. And Sotomayor wrote this opinion, a dissenting opinion that basically reads like some dystopian crime novel. And I can't remember the last time this has happened, but Judge Judge Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, had to actually publicly admonished her for fear mongering he said, what we passed is not what you're alluding to here, because she's saying the same thing. She says this gives the president the opportunity to he could assassinate or kill his former high school girlfriend, and no one could do anything about it. And that's completely false, totally. And so you'd like to think that the three people who were on the court that were there actually arguing for or against this would understand that, but apparently she didn't. And it's hard for me to accept the fact that they would do something on a purely political level, but maybe that's what happened here, and that's terrible if that happened, because the court is supposed to be above this. And so now, instead of the court being above it, Biden wants to actually he's even talking about constitutional amendments, which will never pass ever, but still he's talking about it. And that's the other thing about Biden too. Why do I think Biden's a stupid man, and why is he incompetent? He goes whichever way the wind blows. He always has his entire career. He seems to have no bedrock principles at all. None. He will, he's talking about this because the left wing of his party's talking about it, and he's going to come. And he probably knows that the reason he's talking about it, nothing will ever come of it, and that's probably true, especially on the constitutional amendment level. I doubt anything would ever get passed, ever. And then he's talking about Congress making laws to restrict some of the things that the court's doing, and that's anathema. That's not the idea. That wasn't the idea of the founding fathers, and it's worked pretty well for the last 250 years. And so it's like, well, just because they said a few things, like they took away Americans' right to abortion. No, they didn't. 26 states, you can still have an abortion. It's like they brought it back to the states, and it's a states issue, and more things should be states issues. I mean, it's like this is, the 10th Amendment of the Constitution says that whatever is not specifically ordained in the Constitution as a federal matter belongs to the states. And there's a whole bunch of stuff that it applies to other than abortion. And hopefully, I'm not the only person who's been harping on this. So you have to go back to this. We have to get back to this eventually, where the states do the vast majority of stuff. That it's not just that that's the way it was designed to be. It would work best in that way. Why? And Steve McIntosh and we're going to talk about this in just a minute. But I brought this up during our conversation because states compete against each other. There's competition, and competition keeps everybody as honest as possible. It's not perfect. It's not flawless, but it definitely works in that regard. And it's the same with globalism. I mentioned with our conversation with Steve that globalism maybe will work 300 or 400 years from now. Now, absolutely not. Not even close. And not in 30 years either. It weren't, because it's the competition between countries that keeps everything freaking honest. That's why. All right, we're going to run that interview now. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll be back with part 3. We don't have a long part 3. I got one thing tonight, but that's where we talk about the weird shit. As if this isn't weird enough already. Okay. Here we go. Here's 12 seconds of bumper music, and then Steve McIntosh. Joining us from his home in Boulder, Colorado, author, philosopher, Steve McIntosh. Hi, Steve. How you doing?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing well, thanks. Good to be with you.
Yes, nice to be with you, too. I have so many questions here. So first of all, I basically spent time reading 2 of your books, Integral Consciousness, which came out in, 2000, am I right?
Integral Consciousness came out in 2007.
2007. And your latest book, Developmental Politics, from 2020. I got that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And you have stuff all over the internet. You have a Twitter feed and all that sort of stuff. I've been reading all sorts of stuff. So you basically just devoted your life to what, for lack of a better term, and again, this is a reason I'm bringing this up. Tell me if I have these terms right here. Developmental philosophy. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, that's the kind of the umbrella term that describes the various pieces that I would, identify it as.
And for our viewers, in 25 words, can you define developmental philosophy?
Sure. It's a philosophy that focuses on the evolution of the universe and the deeper meanings therein. It's got a special focus on the evolution of human consciousness and culture, right? Often referred to as noosphere or noosphere evolution, right? The evolution of human history, which is an extension. It's not the same thing as biological or cosmological evolution, but there's a structural sequence of use and dependence that goes all the way back to the Big Bang. And that's kind of what ties these different kinds of development together. And so developmental philosophy is focused on the cosmic dimensions of evolution, as well as the political dimensions, how the evolution of culture over the last 400 years or so in the world has brought us to where we are for both good and bad.
Now, you just talked about the Big Bang here, and in one of your books, and forgive me if I can't keep track of them, I'm a simple man with a simple mind. You used the term scientism, which, right. And if you coined that term, that's fantastic.
Oh, no, I definitely did not coin that term. Okay. Scientism, the philosophy of science that sort of assumes that science can explain everything. I mean,
that's correct, right? And that's the reason I brought that up, is because it's becoming increasingly obvious to me, and I think a lot of other people, that that's just not true. Even though, like you pointed out in your book, science has really advanced human civilization to a great degree. Not everything can be explained by it, correct?
Science deserves our honor and respect. It's certainly improved the human condition immensely. But as I argue, it's one of three essential strands of human understanding or approaches to truth, science being one of them, philosophy being another, and religion or spirituality delivers important truths which are kind of unique to its domain. So I like to think of those three basic institutions of human knowledge as three legs of the stool, right? Ideally, that is, if one tries to colonize the others, right, the legs come too close together and the stool falls over, right? But if they're kept separate but supporting each other, then I think we can get we can get closer to truth.
So why do you think that a lot of people, I mean, especially in the scientific community, I think a lot of people would disagree with you. Why do you think that's true? I don't.
Well, yeah, I mean, a part of it is for historical reasons. So, one of the historical jobs that when science was emerging in the Enlightenment and as it unfolded as a major institution over the hundreds of years since the Enlightenment in the 18th century, it had to do battle with the religion, right? Prior to the Enlightenment, religion kind of claimed to be able to explain everything, right? And so science had to separate itself from religion and become independent of the religious diktats. I mean, we've all heard the story of Galileo and his censure by the church. But that cultural quest of the scientific establishment to transcend magical and mythical thinking has indeed helped get rid of a lot of superstitions and clarify things. So you can view the attempt to usurp all human knowledge under the umbrella of science as sort of a going too far in an otherwise valid attempt to become independent from religion. So there's people have made science their metaphysical belief system. So it's become for many people a kind of a substitute for religion, and it thus takes on religious overtones as we see with scientism.
And you just said the magic word that I put in my notes, and that is belief system. So I'm reading all this stuff you've written, and the overarching thing that comes to me is this a primary human problem? Is that we have belief systems? I mean, it's been well known that, when you talk about politics here too, people, you can prove something to somebody and they still won't give up their belief. It's like, I don't know what humans are wired to think this way. And what is this our problem?
No. I would say belief systems are not a problem unto themselves. Every human being, if they're in the culture, if they're in the world, they're going to have some kind of a worldview. And these worldviews can be one-offs, right? That an individual has a completely idiosyncratic worldview that's their own, or they can be larger cultural structures that people sort of affiliate with or buy into. It kind of defines their identity. So, of course, the world's great religions are each, belief systems.
Correct.
But the term belief system is a little small to hold that. I think worldview is a better term to describe that. And there's no escaping it, right? That is of some kind of frame of reality attaches to your view no matter what you do. So what developmental philosophy attempts to do is sort of look at these worldview structures from kind of outside and above, when we get it right, so that we can see how they have evolved in history, right? And how their evolution creates our current culture. I mean, here in the United States and in much of the developed world, for thousands of years, it was a single worldview that bound people together. But with the emergence of modernity during the Enlightenment, as we touched on, that created a separate worldview, even though there was overlap between the religious worldview and the scientific worldview, or it's more than just a scientific worldview. It's a worldview of liberal values, of empiricism, of prosperity, of progress, and it's improved the human condition arguably more than any worldview since. This is a worldview of what I'm calling modernity.
Yeah.
But of course, it's a worldview, so it has its limitations. And over the last 60 years, we've witnessed in American culture, and again in other parts of the developed world, the emergence of a worldview beyond modernity, or a worldview that is attempting to transcend or escape, if you will, from modernity. And that's the defined term we use for that is the progressive postmodern worldview. So for the first time in history, we have these three major worldviews. For a long time, it was hard to see progressive postmodernism as a worldview unto itself, right? Because, religious traditionalism is thousands of years old. Modernity is one of the most significant events. I mean, I like to refer to it as the Cambrian explosion in cultural evolution. So the idea that progressivism can be compared and contrasted with these other great structures of history, at first caused many people to say, I don't buy it. But now that we've seen the over in this century, progressive postmodernism gaining significant cultural power, even though it still lacks political power, it's got significant influence over the major institutions of our society, especially the elite ones. And that's been for both good and bad, like these other worldviews. So what developmental philosophy attempts to do is understand these cultural structures more clearly than ever before through a variety of techniques, and to recognize that in the same way that modernity emerged beyond religious traditionalism and progressive postmodernity emerged beyond modernity, we're not at the end of history. Something comes next, right? So it's not unreasonable to expect that something's going to emerge that goes beyond progressive postmodernism. I don't necessarily mean hyper progressivism. I mean in the sense that we can see this progressive postmodernism if we use the model of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, a simplified way of thinking about dialectical development. We can see how progressive postmodernism is pushed off against modernity. It condemns modernity. It condemns environmental degradation and gross inequality and nuclear proliferation for good reasons, right? So it's trying to position itself in history and gain evolutionary traction because modernity has these negative externalities and it's not entirely sustainable. So progressive postmodernism has both positive values, what we call both dignities and disasters, right? Negative pathologies, which mean that, again, we need to go further. We need to move from the antithesis of postmodernism to the synthesis of this next emergent stage, which goes by a variety of names. It's not really fully extant yet, but the path of history, once we understand it, points to something next.
Do you think that maybe if I could use the term, the problem here with you're talking about postmodernism is that it's ahead of itself? Like, for example, you talk about in one of your books, forgive me once again, I can't remember.
No problem.
No problem.
Yeah.
You're talking about globalism. So, the way I look at this personally myself, I can see globalism being very successful like 400 years from now. But right now, globalism is basically, to me, it's supplanted by competition. I mean, one of the things about the United States that's really interesting is we have 50 states that have their own governments. And people hardly ever bring this up. They compete against each other. If you don't like the taxes in California, you move to Florida and it's a lot better. And so competition exists. And right now, even though I agree with you about the fact that capitalism, if you're just going to use capitalism regardless, as a substitute for modernism, is very extremely flawed. It's extremely flawed. It's still the best thing we got going right now. So I wonder if if some people are basically just looking too far ahead too fast. I mean, can we evolve culture forcibly? I mean, so I mean, what's your answer to that?
Well, the answer is no. that trying to evolve people's cultural center of gravity, so to speak, is almost never effective if it's coercive, right?
Uh-huh.
That is the way sustainable forms of cultural evolution occur is that people are persuaded, for the most part, right, to adopt a new worldview. And the elements of persuasion really occur in the new truth, the new goodness, and the new aesthetic beauty that every one of these worldviews demonstrates as it emerges, right? The biggest recruitment tool for progressive postmodernism was the music of the 60s, which made you feel free in a whole new way, right? And that was, in a sense, both the tool which attracted people to progressive postmodern consciousness and kind of proof or evidence for the fact that it was an actual renaissance. It had, some great
Steve,
art that went with it.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because you probably don't know this about me. I'm a former professional musician, and I can go on and on how bad pop music is right now.
Right. Well, my 18-year-old son and all his friends, they listen to 60s music.
Yes, I know.
They don't listen to current music.
Half of the current generation listens to our music. It's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. Okay, so where do I go from here? All right.
Well, I mean, you asked some questions about, coercion, globalism getting ahead of itself. So modernity emerges, and unlike the great religious civilizations, which were all based on scripture, and they all had different scriptures, so they had different worldviews and different theologies, etc. Modernity is based on science, which is international and universal, right? So the idea that it would attempt to globalize its culture, I mean, certainly there's been some imperialism, no question, but a lot of the spread of modernity, at least the sustainable part, has come from countries that have recognized that liberty and equality and prosperity and all the gifts of modernity are something that they want. And so, for example, the Asian tigers, they have a different traditional religious background, but they've been able to embrace modernity to great effect. And the evidence, of course, is that they've experienced what modernity brings, which is what's been called the great enrichment, right? Not just for, the oligarchs, but for the middle class, right? That one of the gifts of modernity is that it empowers individual people. And as I argue, one of the ways that it does that is through its advent of liberal values, right? Like the Bill of Rights, freedom of speech, freedom of press. But among, although the Bill of Rights enumerates many of them, there are other liberal values that are key to the gifts of modernity that are not necessarily listed in the Bill of Rights. And one of them is economic freedom, right? Economic freedom backed by the rule of law is what creates this great enrichment. But of course, it also creates environmental destruction and gross inequality. I mean,
yes,
when we move forward, we create new levels at a higher level of problems. And as Einstein understood, it's these kind of problems that are associated, that are the kind of existential problems that go with a particular, cultural structure. It requires a higher level of thinking for the amelioration of those problems.
You mentioned a few minutes ago about the fact that years ago, people kind of equated religion with magic and mythology. And so now, and you're talking about scientism, moving forward, you're in the realm of quantum physics, which for a lot of people is irrational, and so
it's really weird.
It's
weird.
It
certainly violates our kind of intuitive notion of Newtonian.
That's the reason I brought that up. In some ways, that's also magical and mystical, So
sure.
What happens now?
Well, okay, what happens now is we evolve further or we regress, and we probably do both at the same time, all right? So in other words, my work is about helping to define and participate in the emergence of, if you'll pardon the phrase, a kind of a postmodern worldview, a form of culture that appreciates the important caring values and gifts of progressive postmodernism and religious traditionalism, and tries to create a synthesis of all of the positive values of those cultural structures. And this goes with, it has a perspective, it has the platform of political positions. It's got a robust philosophy and a metaphysics. I mean, we're trying to frame it not as just some pop psychology or some new age philosophy, but something that the society can take seriously because our arguments are compelling. And that's what I've been working on for the past 20 years.
You talked in one of your books about you acknowledge the basic duality of life that's been going, that even ancient philosophers have acknowledged for thousands of years. But you had one interesting point that I never heard before, and you're talking about people talking about the yin and yang of different values or different issues, and about the fact that a lot of times it's positive and negative. You have one thing going against another thing, and one thing's basically perceived as positive, and the other thing's basically perceived as negative. But what you were talking about is what you call positive values, and that's really interesting because that's really true. A lot of these issues, there's no real right or wrong. It's just that one is perceived one way and one is perceived the other way, and I guess my question is going to be, so you talking about hyperpolarization. Maybe hyperpolarization is bad, but maybe regular polarization isn't. I mean, isn't the constant yin and yang tension necessarily, that's not a bad thing necessarily, is it?
Sure, that's an excellent question. I argue in my books that this the what I call the prime political polarity is sort of baked in at the level of the sort of the bedrock of human political organization. And you can see it in almost every human polity, some version of the left and the right. Now, in Europe, what we consider the left, where the right is still would be left in America. So, it's relative. But there's interesting research that shows that I wouldn't say hardwired, but there are inborn heritable proclivities to appreciate more of the left or more of the right, to be kind of born that way, even though social circumstances, ultimately determine where you end up. Yeah. But the prime political polarity is fix what's wrong and preserve what's right. Right. And so everybody wants to do both, of course, according to their values. But there's some people who, conservative people are more interested in, preserving what's right as a generalization. Progressive people are more concerned about fixing what's wrong. And if we come to see how these poles are positive, that is, they're interdependent, a little bit like masculine and feminine, or real and ideal, right? Or liberty and equality, even. That's a political polarity that are two positives. So the great physicist Niels Bohr is famous for saying that the opposite of a small truth is a falsehood, but the opposite of a great truth is an equal and opposite other truth.
Right.
And so that is, most of the polarities that we see in the world are typically positive and negative, right? Yeah. And so that's the way people, it's been criticized as being binary, right? Or looking at the world in a black and white way. But polarity theory, which I'm not the originator of, but which I adopt and use in my work, polarity theory recognizes the difference between a positive-negative polarity, which is essentially a problem to be solved, and a positive polarity, which is a permanently recurring, indestructible system wherein the value when you have two goods, the value creating capacity of each one is partially determined by the moderating influence of the other. So again, when we talk about liberty and equality, right? If we had nothing but liberty, we'd have worse inequality than we have now. If we doubled down on the equality pole and said equality is our only value, we don't care about liberty, we'd be living in a tyrannical situation pretty quickly. So ideally, these when you have a positive polarity, the way to manage that system is by creating a relationship of challenge and support. So there's a recognition of the interdependence, that's the support. And then there's a challenge whereby liberty says, no, you're going too far. Equity in outcomes is not, that stomps all over liberty, and that's going to make the society much worse. So again, this theoretical understanding of polarity is very useful.
I understand. We've been talking for about 20 minutes here, and you've explained all this. And so here's and you brought this up in your book too, and that is, are we oversimplifying a whole bunch of basically complex stuff You know, I mean, this is my problem with political discourse, is that people take one position or another and they can sum it up in like 20 words. And it's like when the other person's evil and all that sort of crap. But the thing is, what you're bringing up here is something I've been harping on for a long time. That is, most of these issues, and when I'm talking about issues now, I'm talking about grassroots, actual, things that need to be fixed. Most of these issues are actually pretty complicated. And so are we just dumbing down everything as a society?
Well, again, I can quote Einstein again and say everything should be made as simple as possible, but no simpler.
Yes, well, yeah, duh.
Right? And clearly, oversimplification, just the left-right spectrum, as if many journalists try to force fit our current political landscape into left and right, and it's kind of a flattened horizontal continuum when we have a vertical dimension of development involved.
And I have to, I don't want you to take this as an insult, because you'll see it. But I'm reading your stuff and I'm thinking, this is all really good, but my God, this is the average person. I'm talking about the average person. I guess I'm not average. I don't know. The average person is not going to spend all this time reading this and trying to figure this out. And I thought, you need to dumb it down. And then I'm thinking, no, because if you dumb it down, that kind of negates the purpose of the whole thing. I mean,
No, that's not insulting at all. So I've spent the last 5 years trying to create dumbed down explanations for this developmental philosophical way.
And I'm sure that's not easy.
and well, I mean, in some ways, if it's true, it's fractal, and then it's scalable. You can you can scale it way down. So. Right. On the developmental politics website and the cultural evolution, a couple of our websites, we have, what is the developmental approach to politics? And we have a 100-word version. We have a 700-word version. We have countering objections. We have a graphical expression. We have a whole bunch of videos. We have a video course. So I've done my best, or I am in the process always of doing my best to make this pragmatic and applicable to everyday people. But at the same time, I'm a philosopher. And philosophy is unapologetically intellectual. Part of its cash value is when it can be applied and used and made accessible. And so we have an obligation to do both, right? To be intellectually sophisticated and accessible and in plain language. And that's an ongoing part of our work.
Yeah, let me bring up an example here, and that's particularly, I think, conducive to you, because you have helped develop an AI chatbot, which I haven't actually used, but I did access it. I did look at it. So I have it's probably no surprise to you, the majority of people who watch this television program are basically conservative, and I generally espouse conservative values. I'm a former liberal, but that's where I'm at right now. But however, I do say things that the conservatives don't like. Here's one thing. So, okay, people ask me, I have a kind of, not a science background, but a computer background. And people ask me, what's going to happen with the AI thing? And, there's a lot of people, including very prominent people, think this is going to destroy humanity, I don't think so, but what I do think it's going to destroy is a shitload of jobs. That's what I think in the realistic. I think 30 years from now, virtually any menial task in the Western world will be done either by software or robots. So the question is, what do people do? And so I think I'm going back to the 1960s here. Milton Friedman, he proposed negative income tax, and a lot of people now are proposing universal basic income. And my personal feeling on that, universal basic income would never work because it kills incentive, but negative income tax would. And so I think we're going to get to the point in the future of 30, 50 years from now where we're going to have to start giving money to people literally because they're unemployable. And I'm not talking about a few people. I'm talking about a lot of people, maybe half the populace, Now that is not a particularly popular thing in conservative society. But the thing is, I just think it's a reality. I mean, I guess I don't have a question here, but I am asking one thing, and that is, we're talking about whether we're getting too far ahead of ourselves, but are we? I mean, right now, things are, technology is evolving at an increasingly fast pace. And we're getting to the point where Ray Kurzweil, the scientist, where he said we're going to reach the singularity where it's not going to stop. And we're in his mind, that was around 2050. And that's kind of what I'm thinking too. I think around 30 to 50 years from now, we're going to have some problems we're going to have to deal with that we can't deal with now. But the reason, all right, I'm talking here and it's an interview and I'm talking more than you are. All right. So universal basic income or negative income tax is a stupid idea right now. Personally, I think so. But I think it's inevitable at some point, So
sure, I could comment on that.
Yes, please.
Let me back up one cog and say that regarding the threat of runaway AI or the singularity of self-aware, super intelligent machines, I wrote an article last year called "The Spiritual Significance of the Rise of AI." It's on the various websites, and I argue that this idea of at least kind of self-aware, self-acting runaway AI is actually a science fiction fantasy based on a flattened materialistic metaphysics. It's kind of an extension of science. That doesn't mean it's not going to create problems or remove jobs. I mean, there's plenty of things to be worried about. But the kind of the Skynet scenario is I marshal a whole bunch of arguments as to why that's not really.
And I basically agree with you on that.
Not something we need to worry about. Now, when it comes to a negative income tax, part of the problem with that, if you agree that some kind of basic income would be inevitable or necessary, is that many of the people who need that the most don't file income taxes. They're homeless people. They're, so in other words, if you're an economist, negative income tax, but that's kind of assumes that everybody's filing and they're all paying income tax and they're getting some back. My position on universal basic income is highly nuanced. I mean, I agree with you that it could easily create significant dependency. Like, for example, in the 70s in the UK, everybody just went on the dole. Maybe that's not the best example, but I think that if there was going to be some kind of assistance, it would have to escape the bureaucracy. And of course, many proponents, including Charles Murray's, highly conservative person, his proposal says we eliminate the entire welfare state and we just hand out checks.
Right.
I don't think that's nuanced enough in its thinking. Right. So I should write an issue position on universal basic income, but the position is so nuanced, like maybe, but then you'd have to have countervailing
and you're right.
Concerns. I haven't thoroughly thought.
I made an assumption in my proposal, and that is that something would be there would be construct for people who didn't file income tax. So that's an assumption.
Okay. Well, that's kind of a wonky detail, right? The larger question is: should the government give people money who are displaced by AI? And I'm not entirely against the idea, but I recognize that there are many things that could go wrong with that and make things worse.
Yes. That's
true. It's not an easy call.
Yeah. So, I basically agree with you about the fact that I think this thing about AI destroying society is a sci-fi scenario, but we are looking at really major problems down the road is the way I see this.
But the economy, I mean, again, even though it seems like the logic is simple, that AI is going to take all these menial jobs and we're going to have a giant portion of the workforce who have no job whatsoever. Certainly, I think disruptions are inevitable. But it's somewhat simplistic. But there have been arguments about the buggy whip, right? How the advent of the automobile put all these buggy whip makers out of work. But if you look at the rise of technology over the past 200 years, the technology itself has stimulated the development of new areas of the economy that have kept people employed. So while I worry about disruptions, and those are certainly a significant concern, I think that AI will end up replacing, or it'll create economic development, let's say, in a way that eventually makes up for the job losses.
Yeah, let me run a scenario by you, and this is a real question because I don't know what to think about this. Barack Obama very famously talked about ATMs replacing bank tellers, and then the economists brought up the fact, well, there's a labor transference there, and you need people to repair the bank tellers, and so on total, nobody really. The amount of jobs is the same, but I'm starting to wonder, and this is not a loaded question. I actually don't know here. I'm starting to wonder if when we get to the point where robots are making other robots, is the game done? Is it over? I mean, that's the part I don't get. I mean, are we going to end up with a fundamental difference in the economy if that happens?
Well, right now, for many years, machines have been making other machines,
Yeah,
right? I mean, just that's how GM cars are made, right? The robots make the
right.
machine for the most part. So the fact that soft machines are going to make other soft machines, that is inevitable. But it doesn't mean that these machines are going to be alive, or that they're going to have a will of their own, or that they're somehow going to be smarter than humans and want to enslave humans. All of that is based on a metaphysics of scientism, which doesn't understand that life is not just matter alone, and that human consciousness is not just life, that there's been three big bangs, right? The original emergence of time, the emergence of life, and the emergence of humanity. Each one of these major events brings something new into the universe that didn't exist before. And so, the analogy I use is that in the 50s, they found that RNA molecules in a test tube self-assembled. And then they figured, okay, well, it's just a matter of time. We can get those RNA molecules to self-assemble a DNA molecule. And they spent $100 billion. It's been 80 years of intense work to create life in a test tube. It's never happened, right?
Mhm.
And that's because there's more going on, right, than simply RNA. Random combinations of molecules are not going to make a DNA molecule, no matter how many iterations you run. And so, in the same way that they thought that RNA molecules, that life was just spontaneous, these scientism proponents, like Yuval Noah Harari, for example, assume that machines are going to become sentient and controlling because they assume the human brain is just a machine. But obviously, I argue at length in my work that it's not. There's much more going on than can be seen from a purely materialist metaphysics.
And this brings me to the question I was going to start this interview with and didn't. So you wrote a book called Integral Consciousness. What is your best definition of consciousness?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the placeholder definition. I mean, in some ways it's undefinable, but that's a cop out, right? It's sentient subjectivity. It's our sense of agency, our sense of self-awareness, our feelings, our thoughts, our memories, our intentions. It's what you think it is. It's who you are. It's your mind. And the mind and identity that you possess is your consciousness.
So, under that definition, do you think a machine could become conscious at all? Because I'm starting to think maybe it's not possible. I mean, you could get a machine to think really, really well, but because we're tied to bodies and external experience, that might be the difference between consciousness and not. I mean, what do you?
Sure, I don't think machines can become conscious flat
right.
out. No.
Okay, that's really interesting. That's fascinating. So, okay, what was my next question? I had one.
Again, my article, The Spiritual Significance of the Rise of AI, lays out the arguments for that conclusion. So it's not just some, flippant idea I have. I've got, a lot of arguments that are too wonky to talk about here.
Yeah.
But I invite readers to check it out and see whether they agree.
We'll link to all this stuff, and it's going to be a long link, a long list.
All right. Thank you.
So, okay. Do you think there's any possibility that consciousness is stored off-site? I mean, I do a lot of stuff on the show on metaphysical, what a lot of people call paranormal stuff, and I'm starting to think there's a theory that maybe, the brain, the human brain, does process locally, but that consciousness or long-term memory is actually stored somewhere in the universe, and that we're basically just kind of like radios, in the sense that we just pick up a signal that's unique to us. Do you have any thoughts on this at all?
Yes, I do. Quite a few. So thanks for bringing that up. First of all, within the mainstream academic field of philosophy of mind, there are more and more thinkers who claim that the better analogy of the brain is not as a generator of consciousness, but as more like a radio receiver of consciousness. Right. I mean, unpacking that, would be quite a long conversation. But the idea that we have both our evolutionary psychology that comes from our bodies. I would say that the brain does create certainly some of our conscious awareness. Some of our reactions are, based on evolutionary adaptations and evolutionary psychology as a field. Of course, it claims to explain everything, and in that sense, it's not credible. But some of the things they do explain are absolutely, I would say, right. But then there's another kind of consciousness, at least another kind, many different kinds. But one is what we might call cultural consciousness. And this, again, goes back to the worldviews that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, whereby these worldview structures are made out of joint commitments and agreements. Like language is a great analogy, right? So there are physical sounds coming out of our mouths that are the physical part of language, but the major corpus of language consists of agreements about what the words mean. And those agreements, they don't exist entirely in my mind, and they're not entirely subjective, nor are entirely objective. They're not just physical things. They're what are known as the intersubjective. So that we're positing kind of a new metaphysical category. So there's the objective of the interiority of your mind. There's the subjective, the interiority of your mind, the objective, the extended physical world of things. And then there's this intersubjective, which is the space in between subjective awareness where actual systems, intersubjective systems form, right? So that system could be something as simple as the agreement about the meaning of a word, or it could be a multi-generational large-scale structure like a religion or modernity or post-modernity. As I argue in my 2020 book, Developmental Politics, these worldview structures can be understood as the basic units of cultural evolution. And so they're like think of this kind of invisible intersubjective system. It doesn't have a mind of its own, right? It doesn't have a sensitive center like our subjective consciousness, but it does have a systemic metabolism, if you will, of values. And it persists across generations, and it gives people identity. It gives them a frame of values. It gives them reference to the world. And it's a kind of, best understood as a kind of cultural consciousness that interpenetrates our brain. Most of us receive these forms of cultural consciousness from the family that we grow up in. But now in our current societal state where there's these three major worldviews in play, right, vying, lots of kids, they grow up in a traditional religious household, and then in college, they're converted to progressive postmodernism, right? And so they bring on a new kind of cultural consciousness online. And these types of these cultural systems are kind of fighting each other. They're in a dialectical relationship with each other, which is both good and bad. That's how they emerge. That's how they create a larger structure. But it also means that there's these kind of permanent conflicts, and being able to harmonize these conflicts without just kind of pushing the whole thing into one. You've got to preserve the challenge. I talked about polarities, right? The polarity exists between modernity and postmodernity, and it existed right from the beginning of America between traditionalism and modernity. So these conflicts are built in, but they can be managed more or less well in a relationship of challenge and support. They make both poles better. But when you don't have any challenge and support, if it's all challenge and no support, then obviously things fly apart, and we have the culture war that makes effective governance nearly impossible.
Well, Steve, you have to, that was very eloquent, but you have to actually define what you mean by culture.
Sure. Well, culture is a word that is a general umbrella term that incorporates lots of things, right? So it can mean our sense of collective identity. It can mean our agreements about what's real and true and good and beautiful. And it can also mean, the opera, right? It can mean the high arts, right? So there's lots of different uses for the word culture. And I think there's some wisdom in allowing it to be general and applicable in various ways, right? So the academic definition of culture, which I use just to be as simple as possible, is the structures of agreement that bind people together in a geography and increasingly in the virtual space.
That's a wonderful definition. That's totally fantastic. So this is you're talking. I got so many thoughts going through my head now. I can't even come up with a prescient question. Okay, so well, first of all, it made me think of when you're just saying this, going back to something you said a few minutes ago about the fact that, and you didn't actually say this, but I think there was an implication of this. Well, you were talking about the polarity of hyperpolarization of politics, that I have this theory that the majority of this, if you want to call it a problem, the majority of this problem is a personality thing. In other words, people are either Republicans or Democrats, liberals or conservatives, based on a personality mindset versus actual policies or politics. Do you think there's anything to this?
Well, sure. I think that I mentioned the heritability of certain proclivities.
And that's
and that's one factor.
Right. That's right.
Then we have, I'm not entirely supportive of this, but it's interesting. The big five personality types that are claimed to be an empirical element of psychology, where they recognize conscientiousness, openness, neuroticism, agreeability, and I forget the other one. Anyway, but it creates a typology, right? So that every person has some mix of these five personality traits. Yeah. Some people are more agreeable, and some people are less agreeable. And then we can overlay the typology of how cultural structures, put people in this. So there's lots of different influential factors. And I think it's oversimplification to kind of attribute it to one.
Steve, that's really interesting, because I have to admit, I've never heard of that before. The five, I've heard of 17 different personality types. I've never heard of that, but I've never heard of like these five. I've never heard of that before.
Sure, yeah, there's a big Wikipedia article on it. It goes either by the acronym OCEAN or CANOE.
Okay. All right.
OC. Then that is, they have come up with these five types through this kind of regression analysis based on large databases. I think it's a little dubious, but it's not, it borders on pseudoscience in some ways, but it also has a certain amount of common sense to it. I don't think that there's simply those five types and that's it. I think any typology that you use, and there's hundreds of them, Myers-Briggs or whatever, that it's kind of like a Rorschach test. You're going to see yourself in it. So you have to hold it very lightly. I don't think we can claim that that's empirical. But I think what we can claim is that we're going to have people who are more concerned about preserving what's right in general, and more people who are concerned about fixing what's wrong. And I think that those things shift a little bit with age, right? The older you get, it's a cliche to talk about, getting older and becoming more conservative. Again, these are not deterministic forces. They're more like, currents or even light breezes, that push people around a little bit. But ultimately, where the center of gravity of their values as it attaches to one of these large-scale historical structures is the best predictor of where somebody is politically and ideologically.
So you're talking about the evolution of developmental philosophy. So what do you perceive as what do you extrapolate as the evolution of humanity going forward?
Sure. Well, okay. So there's all kinds. So there's a different angles on this, right? So culture, or the noosphere, which includes both, technology and consciousness and culture. This has clearly been evolving over the last 50,000 years, right? For good and bad. And, things are lost, new problems occur. But nevertheless, I'm able to claim, I think, with some authority, that culture is evolving, and that is, it's not just becoming more complex, but it's becoming more moral in important ways. Because if you look at the history of humanity, people prefer these later appearing levels, right? The youth in Iran yearn for the prosperity and liberty of modernity, right? But they're trapped in this religious, kind of prison.
Well, I have to stop you there, because that is a real problem, real world problem on the planet right now, and that is you have different civilizations, not really civilizations, but different societies that basically are at different points along the evolutionary timeline. I can argue that a lot of Middle East countries are 200 years behind the United States.
Sure, the future is here. It's just not evenly distributed.
That's right. Correct. Well, what do we do about that? It's like,
well, first of all, we have some basic ethics in place that says people have a right to be who they are, right? People who are adults who choose to be Islamic fundamentalists, that deserves our respect, right? As long as they're not blowing things up. If people want to remain within traditional culture, we would be unethical to assume that they
Oh,
need to
yeah.
be dragged out
Right.
of that. Right.
And also we're assuming they're not forced to do that either. Right. But yeah, if we're going to
Sure, right. I mean, if there's an orange revolution, in Iran, then maybe we should support that. But that's kind of its own conversation. So what I'm saying about these worldviews is that even if people are dubious of stage theories, and there have been a lot of immature expressions of stage theory, and a good reasons to kind of reject them. But if we just begin with the proposition of modernity emerging, right, during the Enlightenment, right, science, reason, industrial revolution, that's clearly an emergence in history. And even people who reject stage theories are nevertheless willing to work with the two-stage model of modern and pre-modern. And we can see in the world the places that have yet to emerge into liberal values. I mean, they may have their own path, right? I mean, it's not as though it's just some linear upward escalator to the good. But if we think about the structure like a sprawling bush with no main trunk or obvious tip, then we're missing a very important opportunity to solve the problems of our world in this day. And that is to recognize this underlying structure of the development of values and worldviews. And so that evolutionary structure will, during our lives, people will be moving into religious consciousness. They'll be moving beyond religious consciousness. They'll be moving beyond modernity into postmodernity. And they'll be, if we're get it right, we'll be attracting, gently persuading people to adopt this more inclusive synthetic perspective, this postmodern worldview. And that's the worldview that's next on the timeline of historical development, which, it forms the focus of my work.
There's scientists who think right now that maybe consciousness actually holds the physical universe open. Are you familiar with that concept? And this is actual scientific stuff. This is not like metaphysical.
So in other words, that is the consciousness in a sense is a fundamental linchpin for the physics of the universe.
Correct. That's right.
Yeah. I am arguing for that, a version of that in the current book I'm writing now.
Oh, that's cool. I was going to ask you, like, what's next for you? What book are you writing on? You want to talk about it?
I'm not going to reveal the title on this podcast.
That's fine.
But I'm well into it. I'm past the halfway point in writing it. I hope that it comes out. Sometime late next year. The subject is how we can reclaim a sense of transcendence. Right, the God-shaped hole in the heart of our culture. I don't mean reclaiming God. I'm not arguing for theism per se, but I'm the kind of transcendence that I'm arguing for in this book is by recognizing how the story of evolution itself points to transcendence. That properly, and what we've come to learn about our evolving universe from both cosmology and biology and this cultural understanding, when viewed from the proper perspective, really demonstrates that transcendence, as a kind of an umbrella term for deeper meaning, is we can read right off what science has delivered, and it's just a matter of breaking through, the attempts by scientism to say, oh, there's nothing transcendent here, move along. But in reality, the universe is not an accident. It's characterized by both purpose and progress at every level. And you don't need to have this is not a religious, it's a philosophical argument based on reason and experience that's founded on science that I think will allow us to reclaim this transcendence, which is key to our social solidarity. That's a big part of how we can evolve, is we can reclaim a basic sense of transcendence that used to be supplied by religion, but is now kind of in disarray in the current culture war.
So maybe we're just a matter of syntax here. Like you just said, are we just avoiding the concept of God? Because there's quite a few religions on earth. Most of them are monotheistic. Most of them regard one God character, right? And so it's very difficult for me to look at the universe, and people say, well, what's the proof that God exists? I'd say that you and I are talking right now.
Or that there's something rather than nothing.
That's right. Exactly right. So in my mind, that's proof that God exists. So are we just humming and hawing around the concept of the fact that there's, the question more isn't really how the creator is interfering with our lives, or just is there one? It's hard to imagine that this is, like you said, this is all an accident. It really is.
Well, sure, but many of the arguments for God that are out in the marketplace of ideas at the moment, I'd say are, while sophisticated in some ways, are not sophisticated because they don't thoroughly avoid the concept of God as a cosmic magician, right? As this kind of Old Testament kind of God that creates things and intervenes.
Right.
I think that our concept of ultimate reality, let's put it that way, has to evolve further. And while it will evolve further, I think there'll still be a room for pluralism regarding what that concept is, right? So I personally, I will claim that I believe in God, but I like the definition of the philosopher David Bentley Hart in terms of God as the ground of being, the being who is being itself. And let's not confuse, that concept of ultimate reality with just another person, who's anthropomorphized as the big daddy in the sky. So I think we need to evolve in that way. But I also think that we need to allow room for those who are just so freaked out by the idea of a self-aware deity that they're more comfortable with the concept of ultimate reality as a creative principle. I think that's an impoverished idea personally, but I think that spiritual pluralism ought to allow for it. And then there's also the idea of undifferentiated unity, which is often referred to as non-dual ultimate reality, which, in Buddhism, right, there's not a concept of God. It's this concept of emptiness, or kind of interbeing. And I don't think that's all wrong. I think there's something very important about the non-dual realization that's not only is it found in a variety of Eastern religions, there are mystics and seers within Christianity and Islam and Judaism who have had these non-dual realizations. But again, to try to just say, okay, well, there's no such thing as God, but it's all non-dual, I think that's ultimately wrong as well, because we're groping our way toward a more evolved understanding of ultimate reality. And I think that's one of the jobs of the philosophy that I'm a part of.
I'm going to end this interview here with this concept, which seems completely off with left field, but it does touch on what you just touched on. So, like I said, I do a lot of talking on the show about what people consider paranormal. A lot of that is a UFO issue, which I like to address from both a philosophical and a political point of view, because there's very definitely politics involved in that. So there's supposedly, my friends in the Pentagon tell me that there's a huge struggle in the American military about, first of all, I'm going under the assumption that the extraterrestrials have come here. I have to tell you that right out.
I think that's credible. Yeah, absolutely.
I've been a big proponent of that for many years. So the struggle is whether they should tell the public about it, because they don't know if the public can handle it. Now, I have a friend of mine, Jazz Shaw. He's a reporter for Salem Media. He reports on UFOs. That's his beat. And he told his position, his personal feeling is that you got to tell the public, because the public has to know about this stuff. And then the counter opinion is that, well, people, like you said about, you're talking about, literally, you were just talking about God. People just get freaked out about the fact that this is happening, that some people can't handle it. So, all right, maybe some people can't handle God. Can people handle extraterrestrials? I don't know. Why can't people handle this stuff, Steve?
All right, well, you got to give me about 5 minutes to answer.
Okay, that's fine. That's great.
Okay, so first, it's important. I think that the Air Force officers who recently appeared on 60 Minutes and showed their, the fact that they were observing this vehicle in space that was behaving in ways that are unknown to human technology, and that it appeared on the radar and it appeared on all these different sensors. And so I think that's some very strong evidence that there are these ships, or crafts that they have enough physicality to be picked up by the instruments and seen with the naked eye. And I think these reports have been going on for, hundreds of years, but certainly significantly since the 50s. And I think that that's some irrefutable evidence that there is something definitely going on. And I think the extraterrestrial explanation makes the most sense.
Right.
Now, beyond that level of there's plenty of sightings and they're seeing something real, and the government is not, we quickly go into the realm of conspiracy theories when you assume that the government has a whole bunch of knowledge about this that they're keeping from the public, right? And while that may be the case, I certainly can't claim to know, for sure one way or another, but I know that
Steve,
I know that that conspiracy theories of all kinds, especially when it comes to the government hiding something, that is so juicy, people can't resist it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not sure that I want to go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole and assume that there was a Roswell crash and there's Area 51 and they're keeping it from us. I don't think.
And I have to tell you, my personal feeling is that the government doesn't know what the government is doing.
I don't think that there's a UFO body or a ship being held in Area 51 they're not telling us about.
Oh, you don't, huh?
No, I think that would be too hard to keep secret. I think the whistleblower who was, trotted out last year, he's not credible. It's all hearsay that he hasn't seen it. He's just, telling what he heard. And the idea that there could be this kind of conspiracy theory within the military about it, it's highly likely, right? Because we're conspiracy mongers, right? As a society.
But on the other hand, too, I could make the argument that the fact he's talking about it and the fact we're talking about it means the secret hasn't been kept. I can make that argument too.
Okay, but the rumor has spread, but that doesn't mean that the secret has been released. It comes down to evidence, right? We have evidence of crafts.
Yes,
it's indisputable, right?
Right?
We don't have evidence that's been disclosed of some kind of ship or some kind of extraterrestrial technology that the government is keeping secret from us. Is it possible? Sure. Is it likely? I don't think so.
Okay. That's cool. Very good. I've enjoyed talking with you a lot.
Let me say one more thing, though, if you don't mind. And that is, I think that if we're going to say, like, these are extraterrestrial intelligences that we're witnessing, and we have been for decades, I think one of the most interesting things we can read right off the evidence is that whoever they are, they're not disclosing themselves voluntarily. They're not landing on the White House lawn.
Absolutely not.
And that indicates that they've got some kind of prime directive, like from Star Wars, right? They're worried about revealing themselves to us. And that means that they have some kind of morality. They actually care about us.
You're absolutely
and that should dispel a certain amount of fear, from, science.
Yeah. The other thing is, and maybe you don't buy this too, there's hundreds of thousands of people now who said they've been abducted. And most of those people say the typical scenarios that these abductions are medical in nature and that the beings are fairly cold regarding the procedure. But after the procedure is done, they sometimes answer questions. So you have people who have kept track of this and supposedly researched this say that a lot of people are asked questions, and the questions are answered, and the answers are very similar. And basically the answers come down to what you were talking about the fact that it seems like they have a highly advanced moral culture compared to us. I mean, I can give you a good reason they don't want to talk to us. We're warmongers. We go around killing each other. We're still killing each other. It's the 21st century. We're still killing each other. What's that all about? It doesn't accomplish anything, So, why would, if you can imagine a culture 5 or 10,000 or even 100,000 years ahead of us, we'd be ants to them. You don't want to deal with us. It's like, my personal feeling, but
sure. Well, I can't argue with that. I think that to the extent that we can read into or speculate about, what these things are, right? Where they're coming from, who's controlling them. Are they drones? They come from other planets through some dimensional portal. Are there actually people on board? None of this is known. The abduction thing, again, there's certainly some compelling reports out there, but it's in the context of the paranormal kind of new age culture where evidence is not, you can't really, you can't put a lot of weight on it. And I think that there are people who are open-minded about UFOs like me, but who are not going to count abductions or rumors about Area 51 as evidence until we see more. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
I understand. The only thing I think about the abduction phenomena is the weight of the number of people that said this has happened to. Even if you just counted 95% of them, you still have a fairly large number of people that say they've experienced this. And I don't know if you can just discount
Well,
that.
I mean, you probably got a similar number of people who've seen Bigfoot. I mean, that could mean that Bigfoot is real, but there's lots of countervailing evidence of Bigfoot.
I have a
So,
lot of I have a lot
again,
of
I think
people about
UFOs are more
that.
credible than Bigfoot. So I'm not trying
Yeah.
to put it down.
Oh, I got to tell you, I have to tell you, Steve. I have friends who watch the show, and they, and the Bigfoot thing is the thing that riles up the most. Most people think it's complete utter bullshit. It's like, so I have people on the show. They say they've seen Bigfoot. I have Bigfoot hunters. I
Show
have
us the
them
body. We just want to see the bones. And
That's right. That's
DNA
what
thing.
it says. Right. Right. Show me your
It's
body.
easy to produce.
Right. That's right. I know. It's fascinating. I don't know. I like to welcome all comers. That's all I'll say. That's all in defense of me. So
keeping an open mind is important, right?
Yeah.
But you can't let people throw junk in there.
Well, I can, but and I do, but I let people decide for themselves. So
right.
Whatever. But I can't thank you enough. Really, I hope you
it's
come
really
on.
a pleasure. This conversation has been very fun, and perhaps we can do when my book comes out. We can do another one.
Oh, absolutely! I will definitely when your book comes out. If you don't get a hold of me, I'll get a hold of you. So
Great.
Also, I have to tell you, it's like you're a kind of a culture warrior for devoting so much time to. I mean, you said in developmental politics, it took you 3 years to write that book. I mean, it's like it's a lot of work for. I mean, I'm assuming you're not getting rich, so it's like.
Well, the Institute for Cultural Evolution, right, the nonprofit organization that I co-founded, does provide me with a middle class living. And I have many supporters, a lot of rich guys who love me, and I love them back. But ultimately, no, I'm not getting rich off of this or famous, but I'm not doing it for that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to give my gift to the world, and it's a philosophical gift. And so we'll have to see how far it goes.
According to your biography, you had some success as an entrepreneur, right?
Sure. I've been an entrepreneur. I've founded a successful business. I've been a corporate executive. I've been a corporate lawyer. I have a law degree, practiced law for a little while. But since about 2012, I've been a full-time writer and philosopher.
Yeah.
This will be the 5th book that's coming out.
Well, I'll leave you with what a quote I've always loved from Gandhi, and he said, "What we do is unimportant, but it's essential that we do it." So that's
I'd like to think it has some importance of what I do, and
Yeah.
Maybe it'll have some more importance in the time ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate your work very much. Thank you for coming on, and when you release your next book, we'll talk then for sure.
Excellent.
Take care.
Good to see you.
That was Steve Mcintosh, philosopher, author. I don't listen to these interviews while they're playing. I listened to that one all the way through. I have to admit, I hope you found it fascinating. I did too. I didn't agree with every single thing the guy said, but still, he's obviously thought about stuff, especially about the current culture and going forward. And it's a thing. It's like, does I can sit here and I sit here and kind of predict the future a lot. Is it even worth the trouble? I don't know. I don't. Anyway, I want to thank him for coming on. Really appreciate it. It's part 3. We got one thing for part 3 tonight. This is where I usually do I was talking to him about paranormal stuff. This is where I usually do it. And here's part 3 tonight. And that is, so now I've talked about this in the past. There's a lot of people supposedly in the government who say that in 2027 or 2028, that would be, roughly 4 years from now, there's going to be some huge deal with the ET, whether it's disclosure or what it is. I don't know, but supposedly something big is going to happen. And there's a lot of people in the government. I mean, Chaz Shaw talks about this too. He talks about people all the time. He's on the UFO beat for Salem Media, and he knows a lot of people at the Pentagon. And this is a constant theme. They say that something's going to happen in 2027 or 2028. And hopefully we'll still be on the air then, hopefully. And so I don't know what that is. And no one else does either. It's like a black swan event. They're saying something's going to happen, but no one knows what it's going to be. A perfect example of a black swan event is the shooting of President Trump on Saturday. It's like that. No one predicted that. And it's probably going to have an indelible effect on the 2024 election. It probably is going to, and probably to Trump's favor too. So, so anyway, that's a perfect example of a black swan event. It's unpredictable. No, and I don't know. See, that's the thing. I've been saying that there's going to be a black swan event before the election. I don't think that's what I meant, and which is really weird because I'm going off feelings. I'm talking about my feelings. Like everyone wants to hear about that. But my feeling has been that around September, October, there's going to be some major event either regarding one of the wars that's going on in Ukraine or Israel, or as something economic. That's something there's going to be some huge deal that's going to happen, and it will be to Biden's detriment. That's kind of been my feeling. I'll be interested to see what happens. Now, we know that the political parties, they try to manufacture these events, but I'm not talking about a manufactured event. I'm sure that the Democrats will try to make Trump look like Hitler, and who knows what the Republicans will do. They might just sit back and let it happen and then lose again. Who knows? but yeah. So, but yeah, I'm not talking about a manufactured event. I'm talking about something that actually happens. So I'm not really counting what happened on Saturday regarding my prediction. I'm really not. And some people thought that was the debate too, but I didn't count that at all. Because if you listen to the playback of our uh, debate panel right after the debate, so we went live right after the debate was done, and we didn't the four of us, and especially me, who now spends more time reading the news than anybody else because it's part of my job, we didn't think anything was particularly. I mean, it was obvious Biden had a very bad night, but whether it was unusual, I mean, no. It's like we've been watching this for like months and months and months, maybe even a couple of years. I've said this. I've seen Biden demonstrate every single thing in snafu we had in that debate in the previous 6 months of some other public speaking engagement. Every single one. So no, it didn't. None of it didn't surprise me. That was the thing. So, and the other thing we agreed on, which was kind of a corollary to this, is that Trump had a good night, but he didn't have a great night. It wasn't as great as people thought he did as great as people thought he did. It was mostly that he stayed out of his own way and let Joe hang himself, basically. But I didn't even consider. I don't consider that. A lot of people thought that was the Black Swan event. I don't. I don't at all. So anyway, so why am I bringing that up? I'm bringing that up because, like I said, there's people in the Pentagon that think something's going to happen regarding the UFO situation 2027, 2028. Now, the problem with this is that people always make these predictions, but the date on this has been talked about for quite some time, like over 10 years. So I don't know exactly what they know, or some people say they know what it's going to be, but they can't say. I don't know. Any rate, I'm bringing that up because there's a guy he's from Brazil. His name is Athos Salome. He's 37 years old, and he claims to be, excuse me, hey, he claims to be the living Nostradamus, which is a really good marketing ploy if you want to be a psychic. That's really good. He's 37 years old, and he says he predicted coronavirus, Elon Musk buying X, and the Queen's death. And coronavirus might have been that might be a worthy thing to predict. The other two things I could have predicted. It's like, well, the Queen's 90, she's going to die. It's like, it's like I have a bet going with a friend of mine about. My bet was this: that on January 19th, 2025, the day before the next presidential inauguration, Joe Biden would not be president. And what was my why did I make that bet? Because he's really old and he might die. It's simple. It has nothing to do with politics at all. Nothing. The Queen is 90. You think the Queen might pass away in a couple of years? Yeah, I do. I think so. I predict it. So I'm highly dubious of this guy. But at any rate, he says, he's been saying this too. He says, here's a quote: "We must prepare for aliens to become a reality by 2028. He says a new frontier in biological exploration will arrive between 2026 and 2028, and that an endeavor between NASA and the European Space Agency will unveil a groundbreaking discovery regarding alien life. That's what he's saying. So, but like I said, he's just like a zillion people have already talked about this. So I don't know how originally is. I gotta give him props for the living Nostradamus moniker though. That's if you're gonna be in business, you might as well market. That's what I think. All right, we're gonna end it for tonight. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I want to thank Steve Mcintosh again. I hope you enjoyed that. I did immensely. Tomorrow night, Jennifer Oliver O'Connell. She's gonna be live, so hopefully we will take video phone calls and hopefully audio phone calls. I'll have this fixed tomorrow night. Thursday night, Jonathan Tobin from the Jewish News Agency. No. That's a following Thursday. This Thursday, we're going to have the convention panel right after Trump gets done speaking. At whatever time that is, we're going to go live. That's going to be Tim Conaway, Larry Newman, and Jennifer Oliver O'Connell again. She's taking Don Zora's place on that panel. So that'll be fun too. We will wrap up the convention and Trump's speech and do our normal thing as we basically shoot the shit. I'm yawning on television. It's terrible. It's terrible. Let's just put an end to this. Good night, Esperanza. Good night, Uncle Donnie. And good night to you, wherever you are. I'll see you tomorrow night. Take care, everybody.